Good morning, everybody. My name is Margaret Joyce. I am the president of the Greater Dover Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Seacoast Chamber Alliance, I'd like to welcome you all today to our first ever Mental Health, Wellness, and Recovery in Business Community Summit. We are representing 6 chambers today of the Seacoast, the Greater Rochester Chamber, the Falls Chamber of Commerce, the Hampton Area Chamber of Commerce, Exeter Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber Collaborative of Portsmouth, in addition to Dover. So welcome to all of you. We are fortunate to have a sponsor today to help us bring this program to you. Harvard Pilgrim is a proud sponsor of today's summit. For Harvard Pilgrim, the mission of building healthy communities goes beyond just health plans and includes making sure that organizations across the state continue to shine a light on the importance of mental health. You can learn more at harvardpilgrim.org. We have a very strong program for you today, moderated by Ms. Suzanne Weedy. Suzanne is the co-founder of the Dover Mental Health Alliance, a grassroots coalition dedicated to building a resilient community that is educated, responsive, and conscious of the impact of mental illness. The Dover Mental Health Alliance is the community education and engagement arm of Community Partners, Stratford County's Community Mental Health Center. Suzanne, I'll turn it over to you for the program.
Great. Thank you so much, Margaret. And thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate the Seacoast Chamber Alliance for promoting this first ever summit dedicated to mental health, wellness, and recovery in the workplace. Just quickly background, in 2019, when the DMHA, or the Dover Mental Health Alliance, began, we knew that our community, including our business community, must be part of our vision of a culture that understands, embraces, and addresses the complexities of mental health. It does not matter if you are the CEO of a company or if you have the boots on the ground and you're doing the daily activities of the business. Mental health challenges affect us all. So today's summit is about mental health within the workplace and how stigma and fear prevent people from speaking up and getting help. We're also going to touch upon the interconnectedness of mental health challenges and substance use. Both of these challenges occur among employees in the workplace, and most people don't even know it. But there is hope, recovery is possible, and there are ways that employees can be supported in their place of business. It starts with open, honest, and non-judgmental conversations, and when this occurs, people will feel empowered to get the help they need without feeling shame or discrimination. So joining me today is Karen Morton Clark. She is a certified recovery support worker, an advocate, and a recovery-friendly advisor for the New Hampshire Governor's Recovery-Friendly Workplace Initiative. Recovery-friendly advisors collaborate with businesses and organizations throughout the state in support of health, wellness, safety, and the removal of stigma related to substance use disorder and mental health challenges. Recovery advisors facilitate connections to statewide support resources for employers and work with business leaders to customize strategies and no-cost trainings for employees and family members. Today's keynote speaker is Kim LaMontagne, and Kim is the president and CEO of Kim LaMontagne LLC. She's an international speaker, corporate trainer, and author. She is also a speaker and state trainer with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, and a member of the Dartmouth-Hitchcock Campaign to combat behavioral health stigma and discrimination. Her mission is to share her lived experience and teach leaders how to create a culture in the workplace that empowers individuals to speak openly about mental health. So before we get to Kim, she has a great story to share. I'd first like to do a quick poll of the group today. This poll is anonymous, and if you could just take a moment to answer this question, and then we'll keep it open for a minute, and we'll reveal the results after Kim speaks. The question is, are you or do you know of anyone in your company who is living with a mental health challenge or substance use disorder? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, so thank you all for responding to the poll. And so with that, I'm happy to have Kim share her story. Kim, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And can everyone see my screen? Are you able to see my screen okay?
It's white.
It's white?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's odd. Hold on one quick second. Okay, how about now? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for having me here today. It is an honor to be one of the keynote presenters for this conference. And thank you to everyone who is here today and for everyone who has been involved in putting this event on. My name is Kim LaMontagne, and I am going to be talking to you today a little bit about my own lived experience and about the 4 pillars of how we can really create and sustain a mentally healthy workplace culture. So as you can see on the screen right there, 3 versions of myself. On the left-hand side, that was me in 2009. It's probably one of the worst pictures I could find. It's my passport picture, not allowed to smile. However, that picture is important because that was taken in 2009, which is also the year that I found the strength to say, I need help with my alcohol misuse. July 16th, 2009, I finally found the courage to speak openly and say that I had a problem. But what's also key to know about that photo on the left is that I was a high-performing corporate executive in the workplace for many, many years, my entire corporate career. I was a leader, I was a trailblazer, I could form partnerships, relationships, make the sales, do all the things, coach, lead, mentor my team. No one had a clue that behind all of that high performance was a girl who was living with so much shame because she felt unworthy, and I felt like I didn't fit in because I had issues with alcohol misuse, and then consequently major depression, persistent suicidal thoughts that were unrelenting, and also anxiety. As I mentioned, I got sober. July 16th, 2009 is the day that I decided to seek help from my doctor. And when that doctor walked into the room and saw me the day that I decided to take off the mask and ask for help, he was the most kind and compassionate person that anyone could have asked for on the day that you decide to do probably the scariest thing that I've ever done before, is ask for help. So if you look at that picture in the middle, I wanted to share that one because that picture right there is about 7 years into my sober journey. 7 years. And I still had not spoken openly to anyone outside of a few family members that I was actually on a sober journey because I was ashamed that I was sober, because that meant that I had a problem. So that picture in the middle is a day that my vice president asked all of us on my team to post a picture in our Office 365 accounts, in our email accounts, because we all worked remotely. And she said, I want everyone to have a photo on their email account. I want everyone to know what we all look like, because again, we were all remote. I took that picture in the middle on a day that was one of the worst suicidal days that I've ever had in my life. Every second, every nanosecond of that day, I was being pounded by thoughts of suicide. Some of my thoughts were, get in the car and drive off the side of the road. Some of my thoughts were, grab something, have a plan, make a plan. But I would share that photo because I can almost guarantee you that no one on this webinar today can see in that middle picture that behind that smile, I was about to lose my own life, my own battle. I was too afraid to speak openly because I was afraid of losing my seat at the corporate table, of being judged, and of being looked down upon. So I stayed silent throughout my entire journey of sobriety. The picture on the right-hand side is me in 2019. Healthy, happy, everything that you see is true. It's all me. And what I have learned throughout my journey is that my story is not unique. My story of being a leader, a high-performing corporate executive who has a problem behind the scenes is not unique. And I can tell you why I know that. It's because I share my story at conferences and at trainings. And I cannot tell you the number of leaders, senior leaders, directors, senior vice presidents, chief nursing officers, managers, supervisors, who after they hear my story of having a problem with alcohol, the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal thoughts, they approach me after I share my story and say, you were just speaking my language. You were just speaking directly to me. I have a problem too. So my story is not unique, but what is unique is that I'm willing to take off my mask, be vulnerable, and speak the truth. And also share, I can share one quick story. I won the Director's Choice Award at a sales meeting several years ago. The Director's Choice Award is meant for the person who has promise, who is delivering results, who is a leader, a coach, and a mentor. And that was me, and I won that award at a sales meeting. That same evening, I proceeded to go out with all of my coworkers and celebrate, just like we always did. But in true Kim LaMontagne fashion, I had too much to drink. My daily dose or nightly dose was 5, 6, 7, 8 glasses of wine a night. Now, I never drank during the day. It was always a nightly thing. I drank, I had blackouts, and then I would pass out and wake up every day with hangovers. But I ended up sharing my story with some of my coworkers. And after I won that Director's Choice Award and went out, we partied, I came home to my hotel room. And I never told my husband, I was married at the time, I never told him I made it back to my room safe. So I woke up the next day with over 30 text messages and phone calls from my husband, my director, and my coworkers, because he had gone on my company website to try and find out who he could call to make sure that I was okay, because I was traveling and I never told him I made it back to my hotel room okay. I also learned the next day that there was a fire alarm in the hotel room. The entire hotel was evacuated, except for the Director's Choice Award recipient, because I was passed out in my room. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's something that happened. And if I can share my story and just help one more person feel or be able to take away that judgment and stigma that we often put on our own selves, it's important. The other thing I've learned is that employees who are living with a mental health condition rarely feel that their workplace is a place of safety. Many employees are still afraid to ask for help because of judgment, retribution, or job loss. That was me. And I go out and I teach and I train people, and I'm still hearing this, that people are still afraid to raise their hand and say, I'm not okay. Employees thrive when they are in a safe environment. When we know that we have leaders around us who see us, support us, and understand us judgment-free, we feel safe. And when we're in a safe environment, we feel safe to speak openly. The other thing that I've learned is that stigma and discrimination thrive on lack of knowledge and understanding. And we must decrease stigma in the workplace, change our language so that we're talking about the whole person in the workplace and not just about the illness or the disease that the person is living with. The last thing that I've learned, well, there's so many things that I've learned, but leaders lead by example, and they have the power to transform the workplace culture. Leaders have the power to set the tone as to what the workplace is going to look like and how we're going to support our employees. So I wanted to go through some statistics real quick. If you're not familiar with these, 1 in 5 people will experience at least one mental health episode in their lifetime. And I want you to think about the size of your organization. And if 1 in 5 people within your organization are living with a mental illness, but are afraid to speak openly about it, what does that look like in terms of numbers? Mental illness is more common than cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. We talk about cancer, diabetes, and heart disease and provide accommodations for folks who are living with those illnesses. Do we talk about mental illness, which is more prevalent than all 3 of those together? And are we supporting people who are living with a mental illness, just like we are with people who are living with a physical condition? And then depression is the most common mental health condition. Another statistic is that 8 out of 10 people feel that shame, stigma, and fear of ramifications are reasons that they do not disclose living with a mental illness. Remember, I got sober in 2009. It was not until 2016 that I spoke openly about it, because I was one of those 8 and 10 people. I had done the hard work, but I was still ashamed, because at that point, I still referred to myself as an alcoholic, which I no longer use that word anymore. And I'll tell you why when we get to that slide, but I was ashamed and I never said a word. Another statistic, and this one is scary, it's 75% of organizations offer an EAP or an employee assistance program. The national EAP usage rate is 3 to 5%. I have companies that I've talked to, they are ecstatic if they have a 12% usage rate. I would be ecstatic if I heard that these companies had a 70, 80, 90% usage rate. If we're investing in an employee assistance program and we're only getting a 3 to 5% usage rate, stigma, shame, and fear are the largest barriers to EAP usage. We must change that. We must make it acceptable to contact that employee assistance program, to reach out and to say, I'm not okay. This slide here are just some common signs and symptoms of people who are living with a mental health challenge. And I want you to take a look at that. And you might be identifying some signs and symptoms in yourself, and it's okay. You could have signs and symptoms of someone who you're working with, a family member that you're seeing up on this screen, and it's okay. We have to talk about it. We have to know what to look for, and we have to know what to do. So do you know a coworker or a family member who used to be super engaged and now is withdrawing just a little bit? It doesn't have to be a massive change. It could be a very small change. Are they withdrawn? Is someone becoming more aggressive, isolated? I was super isolated when I was sick. Because honestly, I was in sales. I was in corporate sales. But talking with people, being with people when I was in such a deep depression was painful for me. I isolated to make the pain go away. Mood swings, poor sleep habits, poor hygiene, poor nutrition, inability to concentrate, decreased productivity, intrusive thoughts, increased alcohol use, worry, fear, the last one, increased productivity. Please do not overlook the high performers. They suffer too. Do not overlook the leaders. Do not overlook the people who you know that you can always go to and say, Joe, I need you to get this done. And you know that Joe's going to get it done. No problem, no worry, no nothing. He always steps up to the plate and gets things done for you. Pay attention to him too, or her too, because I was a chameleon in the workplace. I could meet a deadline. I could get a project going and get it started. I could train, I could mentor, I could do all those things. If my director said, Kim, I need you, I was right there. But that was also one of my defense mechanisms that, that mask of high performance allowed me to kind of hide the fact that I was a mess behind the scenes. So don't overlook anyone, whether they're a low, medium, or high performer, whatever role they're in, entry level or CEO. We are all people and we are all susceptible. One of the most effective antidotes to stigma in the workplace is direct contact between peers. And that's a statement from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And that's true because I just shared with you just a few minutes of my story. And I could have connected the dots for some of you already on this call. Because when one person opens up and says that they're having a problem, it paves the way for others to be able to say, wow, I suffer too. Peer support in the workplace also normalizes the topic of mental health and substance misuse. Sharing that lived experience assures employees that they're not alone. provides a safe place where employees can share free of judgment, and it is absolutely a key ingredient to a mentally healthy workplace culture. I'll share one example. I was a speaker in 2018 at a conference in Houston, Texas, and it was for HR professionals in the healthcare industry. And there were over 150 senior vice presidents of talent development, HR, and nursing at this conference, and I was the first speaker of the day. And I got up and I shared about 20 minutes worth of my story, and then I taught them about how to change the culture of the way we talk about mental health in the workplace. I shared the story of being the Director's Choice Award recipient and then passing out and sleeping through the fire alarm. I shared many other examples as well. What happened to me that day is that after I shared my story, I had 13 of those attendees, senior vice presidents, step forward and tell me that I was speaking directly to them, that they saw so many pieces of themselves in my story. So what I did that day, and if you want to follow the graphic at the bottom, I shared my lived experience. I normalized that conversation. I created a safe environment for those people to step forward, which fostered an open dialogue, which increases referral to treatment, and that person becomes a healthier and a more engaged employee. And I will tell you that because I am vulnerable, because I am an open book, the environment that I create for people that I teach and train and talk to is like a cocoon of safety. I have no judgment for anyone, no judgment whatsoever. Because I know that we all make mistakes and we have problems, but if we can acknowledge them and heal from them and accept help from others, that's what's most important. Peer support can also inspire employees to take the next step, guide them through their journey of recovery, dispel myths, provide a roadmap, encourage open dialogue, illustrates that we're not alone, breaks down barriers, and encourages the use of recovery-focused language, which is what we're going to get into now. So stigma and discrimination in the workplace. There's a few, or actually two meanings around discrimination or stigma, and then there's a concept that I'm going to introduce to you. So public stigma is the general endorsement of stereotypes and prejudices as a result in discrimination against people living with a mental health challenge. We all know about that. We all know about stigma and discrimination. When a person lives with stigma in their life, they will tend to self-stigmatize, which is what I did for many, many years. And that's internalization of public stigma. What's very dangerous for you to know about is this concept of label avoidance, which is choosing not to seek mental health or substance use treatment to avoid being assigned a stigmatizing label. Think about that. If there's 1 in 5 people in your organization who could be living with a mental health condition, if you've got a high rate of people within your organization who are afraid to say, I'm not okay and I need help, and then you've got another layer of people who are self-stigmatizing themselves, and because of that, they're not going to go seek treatment because they want that bullseye on their back. They don't want that label. This is why it's so important to unwind and get rid of stigma and discrimination in the workplace. And we can do this by changing the way we speak to people. There's other levels of how we can decrease stigma, but for the purpose of time, I want to focus on words today, because words can empower, humanize, motivate, or unite. Words can also disempower, objectify, wound, or shame. So changing the perception of mental health begins by embracing new language, which is inclusive, non-stigmatizing, non-discriminatory, and person-centered. And remember earlier, I said I no longer call myself an alcoholic. On this screen here, there's a list of words, 2 separate lists. There's a word, the list on the left has discriminatory, stigmatizing words. words that many of us use, and we don't even realize that it could be hurting the person or stigmatizing the person who so desperately wants to seek help. And then on the right-hand side, we have person-centered language. So using words like addict, nuts, junkie, psycho, alcoholic, crazy, those are all words that could decrease someone's ability to step forward and ask for help. And I'm going to go through just a quick exercise. So say, for instance, we're all in the office and it's Monday morning and we're standing around the water cooler. I always talk about the water cooler. And I don't know, there's 5 of us standing around the water cooler because we know 1 in 5 could potentially be living with a mental health condition. And one of my coworkers started talking about our other coworker, John Doe, who is a crazy nut psycho junkie alcoholic who went off the rocker this weekend and went on a bender and got himself in trouble. And he ended up checking himself into the loony bin. And you know what? When he comes back to work, there's no way I'm going to affiliate with him because he's scary, he's mentally ill, and he's crazy. Now, I'm not saying that type of a conversation would happen in your workplace. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but what I want to show you is how we shift to person-centered language. So instead of having a conversation like that, I personally would have a conversation that would say, John Doe, I had no idea that he was living with alcohol use disorder and that he was suffering with a mental health condition. And I'm so proud of the fact that he took the initiative and was brave enough to actually raise his hand and say, I'm not okay. And he sought help this past weekend and he checked himself in with the guidance of his doctor into a behavioral health unit. And I am so proud of him. It's going to be a lot of work, but when he comes back to work, I'm going to make sure that he knows that he is a person, that he is seen and that he is safe and that he's understood, and I'm going to support him. Now, I no longer call myself an alcoholic. I'm a person who lives with alcohol use disorder. I am not suicidal. I am a person who will always live with suicidal thoughts, which are very well managed. If I had schizophrenia, I would not be a schizo. I would be a person living with schizophrenia. So if you see exactly, words matter, language matters. And I'm always learning about new words. Committed suicide. You might see that up on the left-hand side of the screen and you're wondering, why is that on the left? Well, if you look on the right-hand side, the very last bullet is died by suicide versus committed suicide. And I want to talk about that very briefly because I know we're coming up on time. When someone dies by suicide, I want you to think about this. They're actually dying by the final symptom of their mental health condition. If someone dies by a heart attack, we don't say that they committed a heart attack. If someone has a stroke and ends up in the hospital, they're not committing a stroke, they are experiencing a stroke. Suicide is the final symptom of someone who's living with a mental health condition. But if we say that they committed it, it's almost like an act that they did on purpose. And it further stigmatizes that person. So I invite you to change that language to died by suicide. I personally, I was there in 2013. I had the means, I had the plan, I had it all figured out. I didn't go through with it, but had I would have died by suicide. I wouldn't have committed anything. I would have died by suicide because my symptoms were off the charts awful, and it would have been my final symptom of living with a mental health condition. So the role of a leader in an organization, how can we really start to change the culture of mental health and well-being in the workplace? Number one, we have to recognize employee mental health as a top priority. Look at the numbers. Look at the number of people who could potentially be in your organization who are living with a mental health condition. We need to embed that leadership commitment to mental health and well-being in all communications. Shout it from the rooftop that I am your CEO and I am creating a culture of safety where you can all speak freely and openly and there's no judgment. We need to commit to leadership training on mental health, stigma, and inclusive language. Do your leaders feel prepared to open up that dialogue with an employee? Not become a counselor. I do not teach leaders to become counselors. Leave that to the professionals, but leaders do have the opportunity to be that person who can open the dialogue and then crosswalk that employee to resources. We need to shift to person-centered language and then create a culture where everyone feels safe speaking openly about mental health in the workplace. And again, these are the 4 pillars. We just briefly went through this, but it's recognize the impact of mental health in the workplace. Furthermore, recognize what will happen if we don't pay attention to it. We must pay attention to it. We must share the lived experience to bring that human connection to mental health and well-being. Change the perception by decreasing stigma, changing to person-centered language, and then creating that safe environment where employees feel protected and are encouraged to ask for help. That's most important, because when you feel safe and you feel like you can let your guard down because your leader sees you, understands, and is committed to helping you judgment-free, that's when the barriers drop down. And that's where we can really reach down to our employees and say, are you okay? Are you really okay? And how can I help you? And by employees disclosing that they're having a problem, that gives you the opportunity to help them and provide accommodations to help them get back to being healthy. But if your employees are too afraid to say, I need help, you're not able to help them. You are not able to provide them any type of accommodation. That employee could potentially spiral further into depression or whatever it is that they're suffering with. So creating that safe workplace environment is critical. So the next step, and I know we have an exit ticket, you can go directly to the website, download resources. I have free resources up on my website on all different types of things. I'd be happy to schedule a consult. Let's have a conversation, because talking about mental health in the workplace, we must normalize that conversation because lives depend on it. And realistically, from the business perspective too, our bottom line depends on it. Our employees are the central heart of our organization, and we must take care of our employees and let them know that it's okay to not be okay, and that it's okay to ask for help. We must change this dialogue around mental health in the workplace, and we've got a prime opportunity right now to do so. And I personally am committed to sharing my story, teaching leaders to be able to break down those barriers and embrace a new normalized conversation about mental health and well-being, and embracing that conversation just as easily as we were embrace that conversation about cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, because it's that important. So with that, I know that I'm coming up on time. I'm trying to stay very much on time, Suzanne. We have a tight schedule here. So yeah, I don't know if you want to open up to questions or just go right into the next.
There was one question that came up, Kim. Thank you so much, first of all, for telling us your story, because it is quite remarkable and powerful. And I get teary hearing you speak sometimes. And you've really parlayed your experiences to help others, which is truly commendable. There was one question. This is being recorded, this webinar. But if someone wanted to have your slides isolated, could you send them to that person, or can we make those available?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody can reach out to me at any time, and I can send you whatever you'd like. Yes.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Excellent. So I think that actually we need to continue on, if that's okay. We'll have some other time, maybe in a little bit, to have some questions. But right now, we're going to try to get to as much as we can. We have to, like you said, a strict schedule here. So again, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think right now, the chamber, I think, will be able to share the poll results from the first poll.
Wow, look at that.
Take a quick look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty high. So, okay, great. Thank you. What I'd like to do now is actually have some time for people to pose some questions or ask or have some dialogue within our webinar here. So what I'd like to do is actually turn it back over to Kim. And Kim, you have a question you'd like to pose. And what we can do is kind of engage in this group via the chat. At the bottom of your screen, go to chat and you can make a comment, things like that. If you have a question, we do ask that you put it in the Q&A and we will try to get to those. We may not be able to get to them all, but we can certainly follow up with you after the webinar. So Kim, if you'd like to take that first question on and pose it to the group and go for it.
Sure. So I'm going to actually, we're going to talk a little bit today about presenteeism. So if you are not familiar with presenteeism, that is actually, it's like the cousin of absenteeism. It is when an employee is at work, but not fully functioning due to outside influences or a mental health condition. And people who are experiencing presenteeism are all also considered a wounded employee. They're coming to work and they're wounded, and they can be very difficult to identify. I personally experienced presenteeism. And a wounded employee often feels a sense of shame, which could lead to silence, which is toxic, decreased morale, increased physical and or mental health issues. And if you think about the definition of presenteeism, would you be able to identify yourself, presenteeism, in the workplace? And would you know how to effectively offer support to someone who is experiencing presenteeism in the workplace? And how would this be handled within your company? I mean, for me personally, I know that I would go to work and I would give 100%, but I could have given 150, but I was not physically able to. So the question is, are you able to personally identify presenteeism in your workplace? Someone who's coming to work and working while wounded, who is not being able to be fully engaged and is not producing 100%. And if someone did experience that mental health issue or that condition, how would you respond? What would you do to support them? And I'd love for you guys to pose that in the Q&A. So any questions or thought or feedback on the presenteeism? Are you familiar with presenteeism?
Kim, we have a question in the chat. There's a few of them here talking about how would you recommend starting to talk about these topics within a small team, like the first steps?
Well, the first steps is, as a leader, you as a leader have to set the tone that I recognize that some of you may be living with a challenge, whether it be mental health, a mental health challenge, substance use, who knows? We just need to be sure that you understand as employees here that if you have a personal concern, an issue, you can come to us. You can raise your hand, judgment-free. We will have a discussion and we will be able to find a solution for you. The other thing that you can do is, teach your leaders to be able to ask your employees, how are you today? And don't just do it just because, hey, how are you doing? Really ask your employees, how are you today? And then when they respond, your response could be, okay, is that what you truly want me to hear? Or is there, how are you truly feeling today? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being awful, 10 being great, where are you? Great, you're at a 6? Okay, how can we get you to a 7? What's one thing you can do? So it's about entering into the conversation, giving that person the safe space to be able to say, you can tell me if there's something wrong, no judgment, and then incremental small action steps that they can take. But again, you as a leader, you are not the professional, you are not the counselor, you are not expected to counsel. You are expected to create the safe place where people step up and say, I need help. And then you as the leader can say, great, we have an employee assistance program. We have these resources. Let me get you connected. And then support the employee from that perspective as well, but leave the professional counseling to the professionals.
Thanks, Kim. Another kind of situation and question that came about, there was someone that commented that they had trying to change the culture in the workplace, and she has a story that says a staff person who had alcohol substance use disorder, and she came to work intoxicated, and it put her whole kind of community at risk, herself and her staff. So she was asked to go home. She was referred to the EAP, but she did not want to use it. And so she says, please don't come to work intoxicated. this employee or employer tried to help her get into AAA, get extra help, but eventually she was unfortunately terminated because, again, as you say, we're not therapists. So how would you go about this? How do you work with this person in this complex situation? Are there other options, other strategies?
Yeah, well, I don't have the HR background, so this might be something I can give you, my perspective, but in terms of someone coming to work intoxicated, that is not acceptable because that puts that person at risk and everybody else at risk. So it's really about, and again, from the HR perspective, I am not sure how many tries or how many options you can give to an employee before you're actually forced to terminate them. But we can only lead people to the EAP and we cannot force them to use it. But as leaders, has anyone on this webinar ever taken a group of your employees, picked up the 1-800 number for your EAP, put it on speakerphone during a meeting, and allowed everyone in the room to hear what it's like when the EAP answers the other line or the other end of the phone? Because many times people don't call because they don't know what to expect. So bring your employees into the room, make a call to the EAP, listen to the questions that they're going to ask, have that conversation, make it so that the EAP is not something that should be scary, but it's a safe place to go. And then, I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and it was a chief nursing officer conference, and there were 2 nurses at a hospital up in Maine who both experienced substance misuse problems. And the chief nursing officer was actually able to get them both into a program. Neither one of them lost their license. They were able to both get into a program, get themselves healthier and better. And now they're actually back at work at that hospital. And they're now part of a peer support network as well. So they experienced coming to work under the influence. That chief nurse was able to address it. I don't know how many times they showed up before it was actually, these are the steps that we're going to take, but you cannot tolerate something that is unsafe. However, it's really about breaking down as many barriers as possible so that people actually use the resources that you have. And if you have leaders in your organization who have used a resource and want to talk about it, that right there is going to open up the door for others to use those resources too, because people may say, wow, well, our leader's having some problems and he used the resource, makes it okay for me to use it too. So lead by example.
That's great, Kim. Thank you. And we had a comment here too from Karen Morton Clark, who's with the Recovery Friendly Workplace. Karen, would you like just to say also, how, in addition to what Kim was saying about returning to work, if in fact you are, managing something?
Sure. Return to work agreements are something that we work with our businesses on a regular basis. I can certainly share more details about that, but it gives the employer and the employee an opportunity to come to some agreement of under what conditions they'll be able to return to work. So that's just an example of a strategy that we've used successfully with many of our recovery-friendly workplaces.
That's great. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. There was another comment too regarding scripts or strategies for coworkers to share their concerns about a colleague. Often colleagues are aware of a staff struggling, but unsure how to initiate a conversation about their concerns and do not want to involve a supervisor or leader. That's a tricky situation.
It is a tricky situation. And, it really all depends. It really all depends on the person, but really what it comes down to, honestly, in my opinion, and this could be, other people could have a different opinion, but if you see something, say something. That's what it comes down to, in my opinion. And if your leader, if your CEO, if your executive director has created a culture where it's okay that when you see something, you say something, and that people are not going to get in trouble, that's really the ultimate goal. Because honestly, someone saw something in me. Finally, my director picked up that I was having a problem. She saw it. She hopped on a plane from Newark, New Jersey, flew up to Boston and spent the day with me and created a cocoon of safety where I could finally take off my mask and tell her everything that was going on. And she said, Kim, how in the world have you been my top performer through all this? And I said, I don't know. but it's about, you see something, you say something. Some employees are willing to talk peer to peer, but if you are not comfortable, it's about having that conversation with your leader that these are some of the things I'm seeing. I'm not sure exactly what it indicates. So you're not saying that there's something wrong, but really not sure what this means, but I'm noticing these signs. And then let the leader take it from there, and then let the leader connect that person to the right services.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. One other comment or question here from someone. It says, in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, people introduce themselves as alcoholics in order not to forget what brought them into recovery. It is an issue of strength through unity and identification, but how does this factor into the destigmatization conversation?
I really wish that they would not be called Alcoholics Anonymous, because it totally goes against my grain. Because right there, as soon as you say, hi, I'm Kim and I'm an alcoholic, the first 5 words out of my mouth at an AA meeting, I'm stigmatizing myself. So honestly, I'm not involved in AA right now, but if I were to go to a meeting right now, I would say, hi, my name is Kim. I'm a person first, and I live with alcohol use disorder.
That's great.
And I would encourage everybody else to not see themselves as alcoholics, because just that name, it bothers me. Just that name is very stigmatizing. But the work that AA does, amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate your comments on this, and the comments from the group that had some really interesting, questions and challenges they're working through at work. I'd love to move on to question number 2, and I think Karen, if you'd like to pose that next question, that would be fantastic.
Sure, and it kind of goes along with a little bit of what we were starting to get into, but what kinds of policies, if any, does your company have in place to protect an employee's job if they experienced a mental health or substance use crisis? So I'd love to have any of you there put your responses in chat so that others can see what other policies businesses may have.
And if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them right in the Q&A portion of that. Cora Long from the Stratford County Public Health Network says lots of workplaces have annual ethics trainings, and modifying these trainings to include more mental health and SUD, substance use disorder information, and resources for employees could be really something that could be integrated into HR policies within organizations. Thank you, Cora. Karen, maybe you can also expand on your experience with recovery-friendly workplaces where they have no policies, and then you have to work to create something like that.
Sure. So I can think of one particular company that I worked with, and we had talked broadly about return to work agreements, and they were going to work with their human resource director to perhaps develop something. And then in the midst of all that, before that was developed, that company called me and said, hey, we have an employee that's been a good employee, but he's really struggling with some pretty severe substance use disorder. And there were risk factors to others in the company and to the public. So we very quickly worked with the human resource director and collaborated all together to create that return to work agreement, which both the employer and the employee signed. And these are all different and unique depending on the company and the employee. So examples might be that the employee agrees to complete 28 days of residential treatment, although not everyone needs residential treatment. And following that, they agree, for example, for a year to be seeing a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And of course, the details aren't shared with the employer, but there's a release agreement so that the employer can confirm that employee is seeing the alcohol and drug counselor and may also be attending meetings and things like that. So in that particular case, that agreement was drawn up. That person was placed in treatment. And when I spoke with the employer, I would say about 2 months ago, they indicated that that employee is back to work and thriving right now. So that's a great example of a success story of a particular business having and developing a recovery return to work agreement. And we also work with champions, which you're going to hear from shortly, but they have various policies and templates that they're also happy to share, and we can always connect you to many throughout the state.
Great, Karen, thank you. And at the end of this webinar too, if you have questions or you're interested in looking at these return to work policies or any other policies, Karen Morton Clark's information will be sent to you, as well as with Kim LaMontagne and anything regarding what she presented today and presenteeism. You'll have an opportunity to get directly in touch with either Karen or Kim. So great. I think right now what I'd like to do, if everybody's ready to continue to move on, we can move on to the panelist portion of our webinar and the champions in our community. And I'd like to turn it right over to Karen. And Karen, you're going to take this part away. So.
All right. So I'm thrilled that today we do have a very diverse array of champions in our community represented on our panel. And they have each found different and unique pathways to support mental health, wellness, and recovery in the workplace. So the Recovery Friendly Workplace and Dover Mental Health Alliance PLACE designations are specifically designed to highlight the interconnectedness between substance use disorder and mental health challenges. The business champions we have represented here today will be sharing how they have addressed these challenges, how they've removed stigma, and successfully fostered an overall workplace culture of health and wellness. So it's my great honor to introduce our champions on this panel today. First, we have Pete Hansen, who is the Director of Talent Development from TurboCam International. We also have joining us Amanda Grapponi-Osmer, who is the owner and Director of Corporate Potential for Grapponi Auto Group. And we have Dana Lariviere, who is the founder, president, and CEO of Chameleon Group. So I have three questions I'm going to pose to the panel. They've seen them prior, so I'm sure they're prepared to respond. But I'll begin with question number one. And basically that starts off with each of you have had unique experiences from the time you decided to address mental health, wellness, and recovery in the workplace, and the extent to which your workplace culture has evolved to where you are today. So I'm interested in hearing from each of you as to what process you use to help determine the strategies or programs or resources to implement to support your employees with mental health or substance challenges. And I'd also be interested to know, were there any barriers that you encountered? So maybe you didn't get support from employees, or maybe it was hard to remove stigma. But basically, what barriers did you encounter and how did you overcome them? And then what are your current policies and procedures today to address an employee's substance use disorder or a mental health challenge? So with that, I'm going to ask Pete Hansen to give his thoughts on that.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And I guess I'll start by saying, we here at TurboCam are a work in progress. After listening to Kim's presentation, I fully recognize we got some work to do on the words we use and how we use them. So thanks, Kim, for your presentation. But for TurboCam, so I've been here since 2012, almost 10 years now. In our pathway, really started more on the recovery-friendly workplace path. Versus mental health awareness and so forth. That was near and dear to my heart, due to my own life experiences and also my wife and I's experiences with New Hampshire foster care and adoption and so forth. So that's where we really jumped in. We were working with a consultant on our policy. I was reviewing our drug and alcohol policy internally, and we're in manufacturing, so we constantly emphasize a healthy and safe work environment and everything that goes into that. And one element of that is having some good policies on how you're going to deal with, people under the influence in the workplace, and the significance of that. So that's really where we started. We had been doing some things with Chris, and then the Governor's Council, or the committee that instituted the Recovery Friendly Workplace. We were one of the early adopters there. And that was a great honor. And for us, what that looked like internally in terms of rollout was, revamping the policy to some degree, changing some of the wording in there about how we would affect or respond to anybody who is if you had a reasonable suspicion case, for example, of someone being pulled aside because a supervisor or other manager thinks they might be under the influence. Two, how do we talk about it? So for us, I think somewhat of a game changer was, I went to the owner of our company, Marion Nerona, and said, hey, I really want to go all in on this. because it's important. And I said, I'm willing to talk. We have at that time, before COVID, every month we would have all in everybody luncheons, the whole company. We're talking 300 people plus in our cafeteria. And it was a business update, but also time to share on different things. And I got up and spoke about my experience with drug and alcohol misuse, abuse, addiction, that pathway and recovery, and spoke about, sorry, I got to move around the room I'm in, just the lights went off. I talked about what we were going to do at TurboCam, but I shared a personal experience. I put up on the big screen behind me, if you can imagine, hundreds of people in front of me, and I'm presenting at a podium, and it was a picture of my son, our youngest son, Jacob, who came to us through New Hampshire foster care, and unfortunately came to us as an infant, got reunited with his mother. Unfortunately, she went back into misuse and abuse and ultimately overdosed. And he came back into our house after that. And I shared that very publicly. And I think I know the impact of that was significant, because by the time that luncheon got over and I got back to my desk, I had a slew of emails from people saying, hey, I really appreciate it. I want you to know I'm in recovery. I'm here for people. And that sort of gave me the confidence to say, hey, we're on to something here. When you're willing to be transparent and talk, people respond. And I think that really, for us, that allowed us to continue down the pathway of saying, hey, we really do take this serious. We really are open to discussions on it. And our doors, when we say our doors are open, they really are. We want to talk about these things. And I share, so some other things that we put in place was supervisor training on the topic, how to approach employees. And it was really from a broader standpoint, and Chris Placey opened my eyes to this and saying, if you're training supervisors on performance management and how to handle those things, as a common thing, the manager or supervisor should be going to people and say, how you're doing. Those are easy conversations to have. And one of the things that you equip the supervisor with is to say, hey, how would you respond if they say, you know what, I'm really not doing great? And it could be a variety of things. It could be, my wife and I got in a huge, argument last night, or I'm not doing well. I just, this is happening with my child, or I'm really struggling with alcohol and I need some help, I think, so equipping them to do that in a very broad way and not constantly sort of talking about one specific thing, but broadening the conversation about mental health awareness and all the things that go into that. So that was very important to us. In terms of, I guess, in terms of the policy and how we treat folks that may come under the site, under the influence and things, we sit down in onboarding, which I do the training for all our new employees. I start by saying, hey, we're a recovery-friendly workplace, and talk about what that really means. I share with them some of our experiences. I talk about, our policy, but also how we would treat things if someone comes forward voluntarily or through crisis in the workplace, and how we would sit down with that person. And really it's about, hey, if they're willing to get help, we're going to stand right next to them and support them through that. It can take all kinds of different forms, but let them know that, hey, these things, we're open to these discussions. That's really the key. In terms of the mental health piece, I'll be upfront with you, we're a little late into the game on that in terms of a real focus on it. Some of that is due to bandwidth and things, but within the last year especially, we've made a lot of progress. I spoke to our senior management team about some of our ideas of online training for supervisors and employees that they could do through our online portal, and we launched that. And it was good because we had the support of senior management, which is always critical in this. We also did more of a grassroots approach as well. Unfortunately, in the last year, we've lost a couple employees to COVID, and that really disrupted and sent some ripples through the organization. And some signs that I guess we're doing the right things is that you hear and see the things that employees do for each other and supervisors engage. So an example of that would be just a week and a half ago, an employee came into my office and said, hey, I'm really struggling. I could tell she was struggling as soon as she opened the door, and she sat down, and, you know, I gave her a few minutes. She had already talked to her supervisor. She already had given him the heads up she was struggling. She got a phone call from a friend, and it triggered a response in her that was very emotional, but she knew that it was okay to tell her supervisor that. She was breaking down in the middle of a meeting, and he said, hey, it's okay, take your time. And then after, pulled her aside and said, hey, you know, go see Pete, talk to him too, work this out, you know? So it was nice that people knew that, or she felt comfortable enough to say, hey, I can actually speak about this openly. I don't have to hide it. I don't have to just walk out of the building and get my car and drive away with no one knowing. So to me, those are sort of anecdotal things that tell us, hey, we're heading in the right direction. We got some work to do, because there is a lot of stigma still, right? You still hear the small comments every once in a while, and you got to pull people aside and say, hey, you know, we don't talk that way about this topic here, you know, in a gracious way, right? But those are the types of things that we're doing. And I know I've been a little bit scattered, but hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, no, Pete, these are great comments and such a compassionate approach that you're using. And clearly there's been progress in removal of stigma. So I appreciate you sharing all of those particular points. Amanda, I'm wondering if you could share your experience.
Sure. And thank you, Pete. That was a great way to set it up. And a lot of the things that I'm going to say are a little bit of repetition. But I think it's really important to underscore just how much it matters that we go first in terms of sharing our own stories. And for us, it was almost like a reversal of, because mental health was so important to us as a company, when the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative became available for us to participate in, that was an easy yes, because in my mind anyway, so much of our mental health issues that we see, whether, you know, with ourselves and our colleagues, can be tied to substance misuse disorder. So yes, I would say for a long time, we've sort of waved that flag about it's never a problem to admit that you need to talk to somebody when it comes to mental health issues. My sister has been very public, you know, for the past many, many years. She doesn't live in New Hampshire anymore, but when she did, and John Broderick knows her, you know, she really kind of made it her passion to try to just reduce the stigma around mental health. And that's what she does professionally now. So again, not to belabor what Pete said, but just going first, being consistent. One thing I would really like to point out is that our team members are really bright. You know, they know if we're not being genuine. So if we put a program out there as a platitude, look out, they're going to snip it out, and it's just going to erode trust. So anything we do has to be done, I would say, with a real genuine heart and come from a place of true compassion. Just referring to some notes here because my HR director gave me a lot of great notes. I don't want to forget anything. But also we recognize, you know, where we're not the content experts. So we've brought in John Broderick. That touched a lot of people. We opened that up for team members and their families to attend. We've had Granite Recovery, Hope for New Hampshire, Farnham Center, and our EAP all come in. And really importantly for us is making sure, as Pete mentioned, having at the management level, really helping the managers to understand, like, listen, we don't expect you to be trained clinicians. However, if somebody does come to you, here's what you can say. If you're not comfortable saying it, HR is right there to support you. So definitely start with the managers. And in terms of trying to make things available for people to attend, make it easy for them to say yes to. Feed them, provide lunch, that never fails. Provide lunch, make sure everybody's on the clock. You don't have to punch out to learn about mental illness or substance misuse or anything like that. Yeah, and it's just, it becomes part of the culture. And I would say anecdotally, after we've had a couple of these sessions with managers, a couple of managers actually stood up and were willing to speak personally about their own situations, which really seemed to change the mood a little bit and get more conversation flowing. So it's much more likely now, if you're walking around campus, that you'll probably hear conversations happening of a nature of, you know, like either, you know, my friend or my spouse or my child needs help. And one of the unique things that we were able to experience was back when Jim Carroll was the US drug czar, he actually came to Grapponi, and there was a bit of a press conference, and he sat and he listened to two of our team members, specifically one who herself is in long-term recovery and one whose son has struggled with mental illness and substance misuse disorder forever. And I will tell you, the woman whose son was afflicted with some trouble, she is one of the shyest people you'll ever meet, does not like to be the center of attention. But I was so proud of her because she sat there next to the US drug czar, telling her story with passion, with confidence, cameras clicking away. I think we had international press there. It was a pretty impressive thing to see, but how much it meant to her to be able to speak up on behalf of other people like her and her son. I think that meant a lot to her. So to the degree possible, allow your team members to speak up in ways that they feel comfortable. And then I think, the rest of it truly is a lot of what Pete said in terms of just go first, be honest, be genuine, and do what you say you're going to do.
That's so great, Amanda. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love what you pointed out about you don't have to be a clinician to ask somebody basically how they're doing. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about that from someone else we have presenting shortly. Dana, I'd love to have you share your experience with everyone, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to Amanda and Pete too, because I too echo a lot of your comments and a lot of your pathway. Our path also started a little bit before the whole Recovery Friendly Workplace initiative began. So some of the challenges the two major challenges that we faced were, first of all, I don't know anybody who hasn't been impacted by substance use disorder. I honestly don't. So as a business, you have two choices, right? You can either deal with it or deal with it. I know that sounds funny, but you can either proactively try and create a solution in a positive environment, or you can deal with the impact. So that's a very real thing that businesses face. And I think the big barriers that we faced were stigma and ignorance. Stigma from the respect of my own personal stigma as owning a company and being the person who I am, or who I was, I think would be more appropriate, saying that this is your problem, right? Now, I've just said I don't know anybody who hasn't been impacted by this, but it's somebody else's problem. When you realize that it's really everybody's, it's everybody's issue that they have to deal with. The second thing was ignorance. How do we do this? How do we go get the help? Where do we go? Where do we turn to? We were very fortunate that we connected early on with a lot of the recovery organizations, and we kind of built our network. And that's why I think this is so fabulous, because I look at this, I look at the Recovery Friendly Workplace, I look at the Mental Health Alliance, I look at this as part of a soup or a stew, if you will, right? Right? The vegetables are good. The meat is good, but it's all better when it's together, right? It all makes more sense when you put it all together. They're all component parts of the issues. And so when really we view it as our job as a management team and as a company is to open the door and welcome people in. So when you open the door and you welcome people in, you maybe not going to have that hard conversation the first day or the 5th day or the 20th day, but it's all the little conversations you have in between that let people know it's a safe place. We say that really often. When you come here, this should be your safe place to be. This should be your safe place to express your feelings and just be open to that. And I don't mean by that we're walking around talking to every single person every single day, tell me about your problems. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is creating an environment where the managers feel comfortable to have that conversation and say, boy, I don't know what to do about this. Let's get some people together and have a consensus. Let's talk about this. Let's have that conversation. We've done things where we've reached out to SOS Recovery in our area, and we actually have somebody that comes into our office once a week and just hangs out at lunchtime for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and everybody knows they can come talk to Drew. It doesn't have to be for a problem. It's sometimes just to say, hi, how's it going? What's going on? I read this in the news. It's opening that dialogue. It's making sure that people feel comfortable and know that they're not going to be stigmatized. Whatever happens outside of our walls here, we try and impact to the extent we can, but we try and influence that which is within our sphere. I think that our current processes and policies evolve, and I'm very fond of saying all of my best ideas are stolen. So what we do is we actually work with the other organizations, and everybody's been phenomenal about a return to work document or an ROI document, or can I have a piece out of your employee handbook that says this? And we're all willing to work with that because, again, it is one big community, and we're all in this together. I think it's just amazing what can happen once you open that door and you let that into your organization.
Thank you so much, Dana. I'd like the panelists now to just answer another question. So since increasing your focus on mental health, wellness, and recovery, what benefits have you seen as an employer? And maybe also for individual employees, which I think some of you touched upon, but have you seen improved morale? Have you seen increased productivity, less absenteeism, less stigma, cost savings of any kind? So I'd just like you to touch upon that and then close your comment with maybe a sentence or two of what you would suggest to other businesses in terms of having those initial conversations, or anything else that you'd like to add. So with that, I'll kick it back to Pete.
Right. Yeah. So the pros and cons, I guess. One obvious one is, I think, is employee engagement. People, getting a sense that their employer cares in a bigger way than just how productive that person is in the work they do. So that displays itself in many different ways. From just a happier workplace at times, more caring. Those things that you just pick up when you walk the halls and walk through the cafeteria or whatever it is. There's a sense of welcomeness that just wasn't there before. We've had scenarios in terms of reasonable suspicion that worked out, where an employee was able to come back, and you keep that employment relationship, but more importantly, you see the person blossom into the person they could be. And that's really rewarding when we've seen things that haven't gone well, where someone wasn't willing to get help or even recognize they had some challenges going on in their life. And those are hard, but we look at those as learning experiences each and every time, right? More of those experiences you have, hopefully the better you're prepared to handle the next one, and say the right things, and say the things that are going to help you work towards a more positive outcome. We talk about that with supervisors, and in any sort of challenge they're facing, the first thing I always say is seek to understand first. Don't assume. Your assumptions are more likely than not wrong about what's happening. And an easy way to get beyond that is to ask the person, hey, what's going on? Why is your performance, why are you suddenly late all of a sudden? You've always been, and it opens a door to a conversation versus, hey, you got to stop being late. Next time you're going to get a warning. That's a really negative conversation, right? Everybody digs in their heels and it just goes negative. So it's things like that where we start seeing people more equipped to have conversations, employees more willing to come forth with things that are challenging in their lives, and solutions that not just help the bottom line in terms of productivity, but really, if you know TurboCam and our mission, really align with our mission, which is Christian based, but it's about people, right? It's the relationships and things. I can guarantee you 90% of the reason why people come into my office and are willing to share is because I have some level of relationship with them. I've established that through conversations and just saying hi and how are you doing, and all those things that some people don't put a lot of emphasis on. So that's how I would say we've seen the fruits of the labor, I guess. To a company just starting out, I would say just do that. Just start the process. Reach out to some folks like Kim, for example, or SOS, or the Dover group. There's so many groups available now. It's right there at your fingertips, and everybody's willing to help. It's such a good community. I would say just make that first call, write that first email.
That's awesome, Pete. Thank you so very much. And Amanda, what benefits have you seen, and any last minute strategies you'd suggest to businesses who might be here?
So I guess practically speaking, I'm going to start with the last part first, if I may, is to really, to make really accessible, practical things available to people. And I'm thinking specifically of mindful communication is something we teach. So non-denominational, it's just a way of understanding how your mind is working and basically being able to try to take control of how you communicate with people based on the reactions that you may or may not have when you have an emotional response. So for me, that's something that any company can do and benefit from. And when you overlay that on the conversation that we're having, I think it becomes even more critical. As Pete said, don't assume you know anything about anybody. Start from zero. Just kind of hit the reset button every time you're with somebody. And if we can teach our managers how to do that, then they can start to role model it for people around them. I would say we have absolutely seen improved morale based on the programs that we've been involved in the past 3 years. And a lot of it does come back to bringing in the content experts and just really, it's like a pressure valve almost. It's like you can release some pressure by just mentioning that it's okay to talk about. So again, back to the stigma busting, how do we as a company and how can we as a community, to Dana's point, work together to really just elevate this to a topic that's acceptable, that's okay to talk about. And we have part of our mission, we have a mission at Grapponi of building lifelong relationships. And there are 3 groups of people we try to do that with, and the team members are first, and that was by design. So anytime we onboard somebody or we have challenges with existing team members, we really come back to, are we serving the team member in accordance with our mission? Are we building a lifelong relationship? So I would strongly suggest if you're in a company that doesn't have a mission that can be identified, or maybe the mission's a little bit nebulous, really, if you're part of the leadership team, please work on your mission so everybody understands why you're all there, because that helps to get people rowing in the same direction. And if you're not in leadership, absolutely speak up, because I think, for me as a leader, I love when I hear from team members who want further clarification, because I know I'm making their lives easier, their jobs easier. So when it comes to a mission of building lifelong relationships for our team members, we have to take a lot of things into account. And one of those things is the workplace, whether it's psychologically safe and that sort of thing. So I know we're short on time, so I'll stop there. But if anybody wanted to communicate with me, I believe my email will be made available. I'm happy to talk to anybody further.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda. And Dana, if you could chat about some of the benefits that you've seen and some last minute suggestions for any businesses that are here with us today.
Thanks, Karen. I think our employees are our product. So to the extent that we can do anything to make them healthier and happier, it's a benefit to the business, it's a benefit to them, and it creates an environment I want to be in, right? So we work hard. Part of our mission, I think, to Amanda's point, is we want to create an environment that we want to come to, right? Not an environment that nobody wants to be at. One of the outstanding benefits has been that we've been able to identify issues earlier when we can impact them most, right? So you're more likely to be engaged with somebody early on and when they're struggling, and not just identify it as a performance only issue. Of course, it's a performance issue, but it also helps us to be able to distinguish between pure performance, bad performance issues, and other causes for their bad performance issues. And I know that sounds a little bit strange, but when you remove the obstacles to speaking about this for employees, then you can very quickly begin to separate out things that we can impact and things that is only up to the employee to impact, right? So I think my closing words are reach out. Just what we're asking people to do within the business, and be open to having that conversation with somebody. Everybody on the panel here today, and I mean this from personal experience, are all willing to engage with people because it's that important. It really is. And I think that first conversation leads you to a million other conversations, which is what removes the stigma, which is what allows people to feel open about talking about it, and even to be able to talk about it publicly. When I started on this journey, I was afraid that my clients were going to find out that we were recovery friendly, right? I was afraid. Now we wear it as a badge. We really do, and it's positively impacted us. Being able to be involved with the Mental Health Alliance has gone that next step. Again, it's another ingredient in the soup, right? And it allows us to be able to look at our employees and look at our customers and our community as a whole and say, listen, we care about this, and you should too. So for anybody that has any question, again, I'll echo Amanda's statement. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if I can help in any way, because I'm more than willing to do that. That important.
Thank you so much, Dana, and thanks to all of our panelists. And I'd just like to mention, because Dana alluded to it, he is one of more than one business now in the Dover area that are duly designated as recovery friendly and as Dover Mental Health Alliance place. So we appreciate that, and we extend that invitation to anyone in the greater Dover community. With that, I'd like to turn it back to Suze. I think we have some questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, just a couple, we have a couple more minutes. We're doing great on time, but we had a couple questions come in that maybe Dana, Pete, or Amanda might be able to address. One was, how do we deal with HR policies that have a one strike, zero tolerance policy for workplace inebriation, intoxication, when it is typically only at the point of it affecting people's ability to function within their job description that management takes notice?
I think I understand the question, and my answer would be change your policy.
Good.
I also think that there are cases where it obviously, if you're impacting somebody's well-being, right? If you're a danger, then you have to deal with that. But there are very few absolutes unless we allow absolutes to be created, right? So I think I would echo Amanda's position, which is unless you're putting someone in harm's way and there's no way out of that. And I think each environment is different. If you're in a manufacturing environment and you come in and you could hurt somebody, that's different. But again, I would echo, adjust your expectations, adjust your policy.
Yeah, and I would second that, third that, I guess. And it's simple as changing the word shall to may.
Right.
You know, violation of this policy may include up to including termination versus shall. And that gives you the ability to treat everything on a case-by-case basis, look at all the variables and make some real decisions about both the employee and the impact on the business versus having your hands tied.
That's great. Appreciate your answers. We have one other question too from the group. It says, what are your opinions on random drug alcohol testing in the workplace? Oftentimes I've seen termination following positive tests.
Well, I'll start with that one just real quick. To some people's surprise, we actually don't have a random testing program here at TurboCam, although our insurance companies suggest quite frequently we should. I would say that you know, with those, it goes back to you know, what are you trying to accomplish? You know, are you looking to catch people? You know, there's some validity in, you know, random testing as a potential way to you know, disincentivize people to, you know, taking drugs and so forth. But you know, I would definitely say that I would be careful about how you write that program and the policy you attach to it, and not tie your hands to automatic, you know, termination.
And I would add that we've never done that. And I like what you said, Pete, about what, you know, is the spirit of this program gotcha, or is it, we really want to help people? If you really want to help people, you try to do the work before it gets to the point where you have to feel like your big brother and randomly testing people. I do. And I know it's hard. I speak from, you know, we have 340 team members, so it's a manageable size. I don't know if we had 10,000 if I'd have the same answer, but in my personal situation, it's not for us, and we don't believe that it's the best way to try to handle people's potential problems. And again, I do echo as well, if somebody shows up clearly inebriated at work, I'm not going to say like, oh, we have a lax policy, nothing like that. Like, you can't be a technician with a car in the lift and not know what you're doing. That's very unsafe. But the spirit of wanting to help somebody is remove them from the unsafe situation immediately and try to get them some help.
I would tend to agree too, because I think that it goes from the sphere of, I want to be open, inclusive, and helping to, I want to catch you doing something. And that just doesn't work for me, I don't think. And I would put it another way. I don't think I'd work somewhere that required me to randomly be drug tested unless I was an airline pilot or you know, something of that nature. I don't think I would personally like it. So that's kind of a yardstick I use as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you all, Amanda and Pete and Dana and Karen. Great job moderating the panel group. And we all really appreciate your experience. You are true champions in our community, and you're serving for models, as models for other organizations to really embrace this mental health well-being and recovery in the workplace. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today and the work you're doing. So what I'd like to do now is we're going to actually have another poll, and we'll give you a minute to answer this poll. It's really a short poll, and then we'll reveal the survey or the poll results afterwards. So it's, do your employees feel safe speaking openly about mental health or substance use challenges in the workplace without feeling fear of judgment, retribution, or job loss? So just take a minute and we'll show these results a little later in the program. All right, and I think we'll continue on. Oh, people are continuing to answer, so we'll let another 20 or so seconds go. All right, great. Thank you for participating in that. Again, I think we'll see an interesting result when we reveal those. So next I'd like to, we have another special guest here that's here today. Who has a great story to share, and it underscores also that you don't need to be a therapist to be able to offer help to someone. So I'd like to turn this again over to Karen. Karen, would you mind introducing Marissa, please?
I would be happy to introduce Marissa. So I'm very proud to know Marissa Rustici. She is the Assistant General Manager at the Portsmouth Brewery in Portsmouth. And she's also an Air Force Reserve Financial Management Supervisor. She was a full-time reservist for 8 years before deciding to transition her career to the restaurant industry. Serving people and helping the local community is her main passion. She's a New Hampshire native, and she spends most of her time outdoors with her boyfriend, daughter, and puppy. She delves into music and art in her free time, and she loves to cook. And today she has a wonderful real-life story and experience to share with us. So please join me in welcoming Marissa.
Thank you, Karen. I'm glad to be here. I think the experience I had at the brewery really resonates with a lot of people, and hopefully I think people in my industry and also anybody could really relate and take some tools. So what happened in May, I was serving at the time. I'm a manager now, so I got promoted, and I was serving at the time, and a gentleman just kind of waltzed in, and he was hanging on a railing, and he wasn't looking well, and I walked by him and thought, oh, that's a little strange. And then the bartender walked up to me and said, do you know him? And I said, no, I thought you were with him. She goes, no, I don't know him. So I immediately went to him and said, are you okay? And he's like, no, and he could barely walk. So I said, okay, let's sit down. And I got him some water, and I said, I think you need a ride. Let's definitely get you an Uber or something. Just drink some water. Do you want some fries or anything? And I'm thinking, this man is definitely just drunk, like typical protocol. We just try and get him out of there and get him home safely. And so when we were sitting in the restaurant, he kept repeating, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. And I thought, okay, then let's get you out of here. Let's go outside. We'll just go outside. We'll sit outside. It was nice in May. It was nice and warm. And so it kind of took a while to get him outside. We sit down, and I do remember when we were inside, I said, do you have somebody you can call? Anybody? Can you give me your phone? I'll call them for you. He said no. I said, can you give me your license? I can, find your address and just punch in your Uber address. He said, no, I can't. I can't go home. I said, okay. And when we were outside, we started talking, and that's when I realized something is a little strange. He kept repeating, I'm seeing this woman and it's not working. I'm seeing this woman and it's not working. And I'm like, oh, it's a girlfriend. He broke up with a girlfriend. So I start talking like, well, you know, these things happen. It's okay, you know, and time will heal. And I don't know what changed the conversation, but then he said, well, no, I see her every week. And I thought, oh, I think he's talking about his therapist. And I thought, oh gosh, he's not drunk. He was certainly probably drinking from the previous establishment. But I thought, oh, he's talking about being mentally sick. And I finally just said, it's, you know, I felt like anxious, like what is going on? And I just said, have you thought about taking your life? And he said, every day. And I thought, oh gosh. So that was the moment when I'm like, well, I've been trained in my Air Force training to ask this question, but now I'm not prepared on how to respond. So I just immediately kind of froze and thought, I need to get some help. First of all, I've been outside for about 25 minutes. I have 3 tables inside and they're probably wondering if they're going to get their drink. But I was afraid to kind of leave him alone because I had a feeling he would probably just leave. So I said, please just promise me you can stay right here. I'm going to run inside and I'm going to get the manager. Well, I didn't say that to him. I just said, just please stay right here. I'm going to, you know, get some water or something. Came inside, found a manager, and I said, I need help. Somebody needs to help me. And gosh, I think I was inside for maybe 3 minutes. I came back out, he was gone. And so my manager at the time, he went right, I went left, and I'm just bolting down the road. I see these guys, and I say, hey, did you see, you know, a man walking? Oh, yeah, he went that way. And I'm just like running. I get down to the Sheridan, which is, you know, a decent, I'd say 3 blocks away. And I see him, he sees me, and he just bolts. And I'm like, oh gosh, now he knows me. He wants me to go away. So I'm running toward him and we go down. There's a really cute little garden down by Treehouse Toys and on Market Street there. We go down the stairs and he's in front of me. I'd say like 6 feet in front of me, and he's just bolting for the water. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what he's doing. And this one little spot between the restaurant, I think there's 2 restaurants there. It's a very short sidewalk. It's, you know, concrete. You could just sit down on it. And by the time I get to him, because he's a little bit ahead of me, he's already got his arm and his leg over the thing. And I'm like, God, I just took my hands and just like grabbed him, put his arm over my shoulder, and I just really held tight. And I was kind of rubbing his back a little bit because I thought, oh, maybe this will, you know, make him feel better, maybe entice him to stay with me. And I just remember just yelling like, no, this is not what you want to do. This is a terrible decision. No, just telling him like, no, this is not what you want to do. And so we walked and we just, we found a spot to sit down and just relax. We didn't say anything to each other for oh gosh, it felt like 20, 30 minutes. And I kind of felt like a mom. I was just staring at him, you know, because I didn't want him to run away again. And we just sat there in silence. And then finally he felt ready to get up. And I said, okay, you're going to come with me. And put his arm over my shoulder. And, you know, he's kind of stumbling and we're trying to get up the stairs. And he's like, where are you taking me? And I'm like, we're just going to go back. We're going to get some water. Like, we're just going to go back. Don't worry about it. And now I think he realizes, oh, she's bringing me somewhere that I don't want to go. And so it was a little bit of a struggle to get him back in. And then finally, you know, we get back to the restaurant. We just sat down. And that's pretty, you know, I kind of just, from there, felt like I was just watching him. We talked a little, got some, you know, it was very difficult to understand him. And then eventually the manager was able to call the police, and eventually the police were able to take him away to a facility, which I'm glad that they were able to understand quickly that this man is just not just drunk. He also needs assistance. And so it turns out he was supposed to be admitted into a facility the next day. And I'm guessing, I don't know, this his situation, but I'm guessing he probably felt nervous about that and just was giving up. He looked like he was at his ultimate end. I haven't seen somebody in that state of mind in a long time, and it's so surreal. It's very strange, because it's not what we see in everyday, you know, passing with anybody. It's just he was definitely at the edge, and it's so sad. And I think about a couple of things that really stuck out to me in that experience. And one was that when I asked him, do you have somebody to call? He couldn't just name that person, you know. And I find that interesting, that you know, even if you don't have, you know, a boyfriend or a husband or a girlfriend or a mom or a dad, you should find somebody. It could be your coworker that you barely know, but there should be somebody in your life that you've picked to be kind of that go-to when you have an emergency. And he couldn't name that off the top of his head. So you know, it was very difficult for me to even, you know, find somebody else to help him. And another thing that you know, it's interesting, in my Air Force training, we have, you know, annual training on suicide prevention and awareness, and they really foot stomp hard is just ask the question. And, you know, I didn't realize how easy it is to ask the question. I think we often, you know, if you're not comfortable asking that question, or you haven't before, once you do it once, you realize, oh, that's not that easy. I think the hard part is responding to it. What do you do when somebody says yes? And I definitely felt that way. I was like, oh, okay, I'm out in the street with this man who, yes, admits that he's every day thinking suicide, and gosh, he sure looks like he's about to do it right now. And okay, what do I do? I don't even have my phone on me. I can't call anybody. I have my server apron and my notepad, and that's it. And I think what I learned is you don't leave. Somebody says that to you, you don't leave their side until you've figured out how you're going to get help to help you. You know, it took a while. Obviously, I had to run in the restaurant, run out and go get him. I mean, I think I was outside with him after he ran away. Gosh, it was probably 45 minutes. But you can't leave. You just have to stand there like I did on the stairs, just stand there, say nothing, and just kind of watch them and wait until you can get help. And that's the biggest thing, is just call for help. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not, you know, my degree is in culinary and business administration. My degree is not in that field. So I can't be the one to start, you know, trying to be his psychiatrist. You know, all I can be is the person to get him to that resource. And I think the last thing that really kind of stuck out to me, and I see this at the Portsmouth Brewery in our culture, is, you know, we take one step further with our guests. You know, there's that common saying, right? When someone says, "How are you?" You say, "I'm good. How are you?" It almost feels like routine. But I think we really go a little bit further to really find out, you know, who our guests are and how are they feeling and what are they doing. And I think that makes it a very large difference. You know, if I just ask the guy, you know, "Are you doing all right?" "Yeah, I'm doing fine." And he walks out, you know, who knows what could have happened. But really taking a step a little bit further and asking, "Okay, are you sure you're doing good? Because you don't look good." And I mean, I'm guilty of it every day. Like, I will have a really stressful day and I don't feel good. I'm not happy. And somebody says, "How are you doing, Marissa?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm great." "Oh, I'm not great." Don't lie. Like, you know, and it's okay to be honest about how you're feeling in your day. If I mean, this year has been a very stressful year for the restaurant industry, and I'm sure several other industries. And it's okay to take a step back and say, "You know what, today I don't feel good, and I really need a little bit of time." That's okay. Or I need to find somebody to talk to. And I really hope that we can start to normalize that message of, yeah, we're not always great and we're not always doing well. And yeah, other days we are. And we should be honest with ourselves. So thank you for listening to my story.
Marissa, it's just an amazing story. I mean, I don't know if other people on the call here saw your article in the paper, but we circulated it among our industry folks saying, my gosh, this is just amazing. It's such an example of, you say it, you're not a therapist, you're not a psychiatrist, it's not your background. However, you recognize some signs. You asked that question directly. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? Which is textbook. It does not put the thought in someone else's head. It's actually textbook reaching out to open the door to see what their response is. And then you stayed with this person. So kudos to you. I mean, that is fantastic. And a couple people on the call have already mentioned mental health first aid. And that is a class that you can take, which teaches adults how to recognize and respond to others in emotional distress. And I don't know if you've ever taken that class, but geez, you could be like instructor material right off the bat. So anyways, thank you so much for sharing your story. We really, really appreciate it, and great job. You most likely, you saved a life that day. So thank you.
Thanks, Suze. And
Yeah.
anybody with questions, I'm happy to answer through.
I just wanted to make a comment, and it's actually a big comment, because you said you're not a counselor, you didn't counsel him, but what you did is you saw him and you didn't judge him, and you created that safe place where he could say, yeah, I'm not okay, and you were just with him. You didn't have to say anything. You didn't have to do anything. That's not always the same in every single case, but sometimes people just need to know that they're not alone. In my own personal experience, I'll tell you real quick, suicidal thoughts all day, every day, until one day I had a conversation with my sister, and I asked her point blank, don't you ever just want to kill yourself sometimes after all of the stuff that you're going through? She looked me dead in the eye, straight in the eye, and she says, Kim, I've never had that thought before. Never. I personally thought everyone had suicidal thoughts all day, every day, because that's what my life used to be like. But my sister saw me, she looked at me, she said, no, that's not right. And she sat with me, just like what you did to that gentleman. So thank you so much for seeing him, for supporting him, for not writing him off, and for seeing that he's a person. You really did save that man's life. You really did.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Great comments. Well, what I'd like to do is we have another question for the group. I'm going to ask it myself this time. But what I'd like to do is, if you have a comment or a follow-up question to this question, comments in the chat, that would be fantastic. And then if you have a question, you can use the Q&A. But this is what I will ask. Would it be valuable for your organization to dive deeper into learning ways to normalize these topics regarding mental health challenges, substance use disorder, and implement policies to support your employees' mental health and recovery from substance use? And if so, why would this be valuable to you? I'd just love to open up some conversation within the chat function of this webinar. Again, the question is, would it be valuable to your organization to dive deeper into learning ways to normalize these topics and implement policies to support your employees' mental health challenges and or recovery from substance use? And if so, why? And if you'd also like to comment, what would be helpful for you? Because between Karen and Kim and I, we might be able to have some resources to help you. Thanks, Kim, from the Greater YMCA.
Hey.
Anybody else? That's great. Some of the people here were new to the recovery-friendly workplace, And this person likes to educate their employees and be able to have a place or person that they can come to. So kind of have a go-to within the organization. Some other people said, they're coming in quick here.
They are.
Let me see here. Other questions or comments? I think it would be valuable for employees in management to learn how to recognize some of the subtle signs and how to have those conversations. Agreed. Some people said, another person said, we have already codified HR policy in regards to substance use and are expanding. Oh, I gotta just move my cursor down here. Expanding resources through the recovery-friendly workplace and similar agencies is a step in the right direction. It's great.
I just wanted to comment that I love the fact that someone said we want to teach people how to learn the subtle signs, because sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious. So I'm not sure who said that, but that's a great point, because there's subtle and then there's not so subtle. We need to know both. Right.
Addressing employees who are of the mindset that there is no problem, ignore and press on. That is tough. One comment is, my agency has great policies in place. However, that doesn't take away the stigma and everyday language issues that impact people feeling safe. Great. It's probably even harder to recognize as our company with 95% of almost 3,000 employees are working remotely. Working remotely isolates it even more. Absolutely. That's a great comment and something that, people are aware of. So how do you deal with that when you don't have a face-to-face with employees? That's a tough issue. All right. Any other comments from Kim or Karen?
No,
Oh, sorry, Kim, go right ahead.
it's just great to see all the comments coming in, because I think we all really could use the opportunity to dive into how can we further support our employees, and how can we further prepare our leaders and our supervisors, and to be able to feel confident that they have the skills to be able to identify someone who's having a problem, open that dialogue, and then get them to the right services. So I'm really happy to see that there's a lot of folks who really see the value in training and supporting and becoming recovery friendly workplaces and doing all those things. So just wanted to say thank you, everyone.
And I'll just add really quickly, I noticed Betsy Landon's comment about having most employees be remote. We have at least 2 companies that are coming to mind, recovery-friendly workplaces, that have had that same situation, and I'd be happy to connect you to those companies who have really had success with some of the strategies they've used to keep people engaged and to really know how their employees are doing.
That's great. Another comment here, this Amanda Gagney said, we just started a D&I group. I'm not quite sure what D&I means. Maybe someone else does. And I recommend this summit to the team because talking about mental health and recovery needs to be just as common as general health concerns, right? Why do we talk about, this person might have heart disease, but why don't we say, well, they also are suffering from depression? Why is that such a stigmatized topic? We are customer facing, she says. It's all about being on stage so that the customers have a great experience. But there needs to be that safe place to have real conversations so we can support one another. That's great. Yep. Yeah, diversity and inclusion. This is all part of diversity and inclusion too. You can't ignore mental health challenges or substance use recovery, or substance use disorders and recovery. It's all part of the stew, like Dana LaRiviere said. Suzanne Meady from UNH says, when we work in the mental health substance use field, it is easy to support clients and coworkers. We don't do a great job of taking care of ourselves. The wounded warrior syndrome is very real. Absolutely. And I think Kim talked a little bit about that in the early stages. So I appreciate the comments here. Thank you so much for that. And, I often say this regarding with the Dover Mental Health Alliance, Karen's heard this a lot, is that sometimes people just don't know what the first step is. What do we do? What's the first step? It seems so overwhelming and daunting. And I encourage you to reach out to Kim, Karen, or I to just have that conversation and be like, well, let's assess, see what's going on, and maybe we can help you with some of the resources that we can offer to take that first step, because that's really what it is. You just got to take that first step to be able to start to change the workplace culture. So thank you all for your comments. We're doing great on time. I'm really excited about this. At this time, I'd like if Melissa from the Chamber could actually share our poll number 2 results.
Ooh.
Interesting. Yeah,
Ooh.
sure. That makes sense. If you're not speaking out loud about it, then you might be unsure if people don't feel safe about speaking about mental health.
Wow.
So
That's a telling number right there, that,
Mhm.
that there are that many workplaces who we don't know if our employees feel safe.
Yeah.
That's a pretty telling number right there. And just seeing that number, I absolutely encourage, let's keep this conversation going, because the poll, in my opinion, I would love this poll to say 100% yes, versus the majority of people not knowing if our own employees are feeling safe or not. That's a very telling number. So thank you for being honest with that information.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
The
you.
reason why we're here today.
That's right. Okay, I think we're going to continue to move on here. We have our final speaker of the day, which some of you may or may not know, Chief Justice John Broderick. He's going to be closing out, and then I'll give some final words at the end after John speaks. But if you don't know John Broderick, I'll give you just a little background. Is prior to joining the Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health team, John Broderick was a member of the New Hampshire Supreme Court from 1995 to 2010. He was serving as the Chief Justice from 2003 to 2010. And during his time on the court, the Broderick family experienced the devastating impacts of mental illness in a very public way. In 2016, he helped create a public awareness campaign around the steps people can take when they recognize that they or someone they care about is experiencing a mental health challenge. So I'm very pleased to have John on the call today. He's a great speaker. And John, take it away.
Thank you very much. You guys are ahead of schedule. That's great to see. First of all, let me just congratulate everyone who put this forum together, and for all the speakers. I've been watching attentively the last hour and a half, and it's excellent to have this discussion. It's so long overdue. And I'm really happy to be part of it today. And in many ways, I'm the least likely person to be involved in this. I'm a baby boomer, not that you could have guessed that. And the world I'm from, nobody ever talked about mental health issues, nobody. Everybody in my childhood had perfect mental health, and every marriage was happy too. Neither of those were true, but that was the culture I come from. And because of events in my own life that Suzanne referenced, I've been on a journey for the last many years now to do what I can in the time that I am allowed to change the conversation and the culture around mental health, because we need to, and it's way past time. I think you all know that, but we haven't done a great job of it. We're starting, we're learning, but we have such a distance to travel. And because of my work through Dartmouth-Hitchcock the last 5 years now, I've had a chance to meet your future workforce. And I mean that literally. I've been to 250 to 300 middle schools and high schools in 5 New England states. I've spoken about mental health awareness over 660 times, and I would do it every day if I had the opportunity. I've spoken to 90,000 kids from 6th grade to 12th grade, spoken to 30,000 adults. And what I've learned in my travels, it doesn't matter how big the room is, who the crowd is. It's a topic whose time has come. One thing I've learned in my travels is that this generation, the younger generation, I've been really privileged to get to know. I love these kids. They're an amazing group of people. They're the least judgmental generation in the history of our country, and I take my hat off to them. But I also know that from all the surveys and data collection, that anxiety and depression are epidemic among young people. Not their fault, by the way, but it's the reality they're dealing with. As Kim LaMontagne said, 1 in 5 people, it's true for adolescents, will have a mental health problem in their lifetime. I happen to think among young people, it's higher than that, but it's real. Half of all mental illness in the United States begins by age 14, by the way, 2/3 by age 23. And we don't talk about it like we talk about every physical illness in this country. And I can tell you from all the kids who have confided in me, and there are thousands of them, I've shared more hugs with kids I'll never see again than I can really describe. And one of the speakers earlier talked about being vulnerable and open. And I've done that in my talks, talk about my own journey, my family's journey, my many mistakes because I didn't really understand mental illness. When you open up, people return the favor and they open up too. And so I think people who lead businesses should learn from that, as I have. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be real. And people recognize that and they trust you if you do that. So it's important to do it. But I've had that experience with so many kids and they've shared with me. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty. This generation, more talented in so many ways than any prior generation, is not going to join your company or stay with you if you do not have a user-friendly environment for mental health and substance, by the way. Often those are co-occurring issues. They expect that. And if you don't provide it or don't want to talk about it, they're not going to stay with you. It's that simple. This generation knows in many ways what most of us didn't. They have very real expectations about life and work-life balance and what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. And they want a world that's more flexible, more accommodating, more person-centered, perhaps, in any prior generation. And if they don't find it, they won't stay. Some of the surveys was one recently in the Harvard Business Review. 75% of millennials from age 24 to 39, 75% said they had left the job, at least in part because of mental health. Among Gen Zers, 18 to 23, it's even higher. And so it's important that we recognize that. And agreeing or disagreeing with the numbers isn't going to change the numbers. They're real. And according to a lot of the surveys that I've read, businesses writ large in the United States lose upwards of $100 billion with a B, dollars a year because of mental health and substance issues in the workplace. And that doesn't mean we should weed out people with those issues. It means we should learn to accommodate those challenges. And when I first saw those numbers, I thought, how is that possible? How could you get to a number that high? But it makes sense. A lot of businesses spend money training people. That's not a small expense, but there's usually a good return. At least that's the expectation. But if you have mental health issues at the workplace or substance issues, and there's no way really to deal with them, you're not going to stay there. So it's going to have a high turnover rate, and that costs you money. Absenteeism. The number of days people are absent every year in this country is often driven, sometimes largely driven, by mental health or substance issues, either their own or someone in their own family. And then Kim LaMontagne talked about the third part of the trifecta, which is presenteeism, which means you're present at work. But according to some economists, the average worker is not present at work, even though they're physically there, maybe 2 days a month. Add up those numbers, it's substantial. If you have a workplace that's user-friendly and accommodating, you will find in time that your bottom line will improve, your productivity will improve, your employee morale will improve, and your traditional healthcare costs and disability costs over time will decline. So you can choose not to deal with the problem, but the problem won't go away. There's been a lot of talk this morning about stigma, and I think it's so true. It's changing, but not rapidly enough, by the way, but we need to be on that issue. We need to lead that charge. And I believe, from my experience, that culture change is what we need in the workplace as it relates to mental health and substance. And some of the incredible people on this Zoom program this morning are leading that, and my hat's off to them. More of us need to do it, not just because it's a nice thing to do or a decent thing to do, which it is. It's also a smart thing to do. It's profitable to do it. It's productive to do it. And it's going to open your workplace to people you might not otherwise attract. And part of the stigma, by the way, around mental health is that people who have those issues or substance issues are maybe not as smart as the rest of us, maybe not as productive as we would be, maybe not as gifted as some see us as being. Those are all wrong, by the way. A lot of people with mental health problems are very high achievers. Kim LaMontagne was talking about her own life experience. She was obviously highly successful. We see it in our broader society. Michael Phelps, who won 28 gold medals, talks about his depression. Simone Biles, one of the most decorated women gymnasts in the world, was candid enough to talk about her own mental health problems. When Naomi Osaka, the tennis player who had to drop out of the French Open, and she was fine, by the way. That's called stigma. If she had had any other illness, we would have embraced her. So a lot of people are speaking out. Prince Harry talks about his own depression. Princess Diana had anxiety and depression. It's not isolated to some group less worthy. It's just not. And so my message is, having interviewed your future workforce, having hugged a lot of them, and these kids will be successful. I have no doubt about it. They just won't feel complete. And they may not be as successful as they could be. And they are going to make demands on your workforce and your workplace that you better be prepared to meet. I have a feeling that a lot of you out there in the world of business are going to be looking at a 32 or 36-hour work week in the not too distant future, because that's what younger people are going to demand. You're going to be dealing with hybrid workers, because that's what young people who want a work-life balance are going to demand. But you need to provide flexibility. You need to provide mandatory vacation. Most of us had vacation days that went unused. This generation will have a different attitude. And so if you want loyalty and productivity and length of service, you need to take a different look at what you're doing in the workplace. And to make sure you're doing all you can, it starts with the CEO, and he or she needs to walk the walk. If you go online and you look up Cisco Systems or Starbucks and see what their CEOs are doing and have done in the last several years, because they understand exactly what I'm saying, and they were ahead of the curve. But many other people are running to catch up. And I would just suggest that it wouldn't be wise to pretend that the world of mental health is not going to impact your business. And it could impact it in a very positive way. There are people working for you right now, today, who have mental health challenges, or family members that do. And based on that poll I saw, 60% of them are unsure if they should mention it. And I agree with Kim LaMontagne. You want 100% of people to know it's okay to talk about it. And the police chief in Nashua and Manchester, I've spoken to both of them recently, and both of them, leaders of those departments, have been very upfront with their officers and staff, saying you won't be penalized, you won't lose your job, we have your back. It's part of your job to speak up. It's okay not to be okay, as Kim LaMontagne said, but it's not okay to pretend you're okay. And when we can really do that, if that's a culture in the workplace, things will change. And you need policies in writing that support what you're saying orally. Because as Amanda Craponi said, employees are pretty smart and they can see sincerity and truth. And they will be incredibly dedicated to you if you are dedicated to their mental health and well-being. And it's not only time to do it, it's really way past time. So I encourage everyone to take a hard look at what they're doing. And if you have to use outside consultants to find out the best policies or the best practices, I encourage you to do it because it's essential. That much I know. I've talked to your future workers. I'm telling you what I've learned. But if you have any questions or comments, obviously I'd love to receive them.
We have some time if anybody has a question or a comment. Thank you, John, by the way.
Thank you, Susan. Happy to be part of it.
And just as I wait a minute, if people have questions or comments, I just want to say, John, it was brought to our attention that you received the Kathleen Sherman Memorial Award this past Monday. Congratulations on that. It's probably I'm sure it's for your advocacy for mental health. So,
well, I was happy to receive it. Obviously, honored to receive it, but she had been a Navy nurse for 20 years, and her life ended tragically. So I was proud to receive it. It's sad that there was an award in a way, but also happy that people are talking about it, dealing with it. That's how change happens.
yeah.
That's how it happened. My mother years ago used to whisper the word cancer. She used to whisper the word cancer, and that wasn't unusual. Now it seems silly. We were like that with HIV/AIDS in the early 80s too. And now, thank God, we're talking about it and getting help and treatment. Mental health has been ignored in this country for generations, and it's not helpful to ignore it. And treatment is possible, and conversation is often the best treatment.
Yeah, I just this past week finished a course teaching teens how to recognize and respond to other teens in emotional distress. And one of the things that was a big tenet of this class is to say, look, if you're not feeling great, don't wait. Get help right away, or else this problem, this challenge you have might snowball into a crisis. And then it's a lot more difficult to recover from or get back to normal from. So I echo your words, John, and thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, or do you have a last comment, John?
No, I just want to hold this chart up, by the way. And Kim LaMontagne had a more exhaustive list, but I spent 6 years handing these cards out. The 5 most common signs of mental illness. They're not diagnostic, but it's hard to have a mental health problem and not have one or more of these signs. And I've given out now over 450,000 of those cards. I don't mean drop them from a helicopter, I mean handed them out. And my goal would be, by the way, to have one in every workplace in New Hampshire and New England. And trust me, when people see those cards and they know that management put them up, it sends a very subtle message, which is okay here. It's okay. And conversation will begin. And I've seen it happen in schools, repeatedly happen in schools. And it ought to happen. I love people to have them on the refrigerator at home, too, by the way. Maybe we could all.
And John, I would have to tell you that I agree with you. And I've seen the 5 Signs campaign. I've seen those cards everywhere. And I was actually just up at some state offices in New Hampshire, and your 5 Signs campaign cards were everywhere in the commissioner's office in the Department of Safety.
Well, the commissioner's one of my heroes, but he's really doing great work. Jim, you helped him on that. But I'll tell you one of the highlights of my life. Maybe this is a statement how sad my life is. I have no idea. But I love New Hampshire. It doesn't have a lot of billboards. But when we started this campaign, I had people donate billboard space. Ah. One day I was riding along Route 293 in Manchester, and there it was in lights. I pulled into the breakdown lane to take a picture of it. I thought, oh my God, that is amazing. People will see it and start asking about what's that sign about? What are those signs for? We cannot get this visible enough. And all the kids I know and the kids I've hugged, they would agree with me.
Well, John, I just want to thank you for your time. You are a very busy man traveling. I know not just in New England, but throughout the country now with your message. And it really resonated, like you said, with hundreds of thousands of youth and adults. So thank you so much for your advocacy with us. You've been an inspiration for me, for sure, and for others. So
Thanks, Susan.
yeah. So I'd just like we're going to close the summit out. We're early. That's great. People can get on with their lives, but hopefully today piqued your interest in learning ways to support the mental health and recovery of your employees. After this meeting closes, we do just hang on for one quick sec because we do have a very quick 3-question survey that we'd like your feedback on. Just please take a moment to give us that feedback. You'll also receive an email from the Chamber with Karen, Kim, and my contact information, some areas that we may be able to help you take the first steps in addressing these kind of challenges in your workplace, and some resources, just overall general resources for mental health, suicide prevention lines, that kind of thing. So that'll be coming shortly from the Chamber. But finally, I'd just like to say thank you so much to Kim LaMontagne, Chief Justice John Broderick, Karen Morton Clark, as well as our panelists, Dana LaRiviere, Pete Hansen from Dana LaRiviere from Chameleon Group, Pete Hansen from TurboCam, Amanda Grapponi-Osmer from Grapponi Auto, as well as Marissa Rustici for telling us their stories and how they've implemented and really sort of embraced this mental health work. I want to also thank the Seacoast Chamber Alliance for putting this on and helping us pull this together. It was really, really great working with you all, as well as the sponsor of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. So just again, thanks so much. And please, if you could just hang on for one sec after this closes, there'll be a quick survey and then you'll receive some other information later from the Chamber. So have a great day all. Thank you so much.